Herman Melville is one of the greatest authors of all time and was a champion of consciously creating transformative fiction, using your powers, your talent, not just to create some slop, but to actually create a novel or a piece of writing that can change the world. And here on Right Conscious, we talk about the best books and authors of all time. And of course, Melville is on that list. But more importantly, I help writers and readers like you activate so that we can create a literary renaissance. And so today we have a quote from Melville himself, which will add him to an ever-growing list of authors who believe that you can consciously create a transformative novel. And I am here right now to empower you. I am here right now to snatch you out of the abyss of modern writing advice that tells you that you can't create something transformative, because what is transformative? Can't every single thing be transformative? I'm here to break you free from that and deliver you, yes, I'm speaking like a preacher, to the promised land of actually doing something with your talent that matters. Because all the best authors behind me, the GOATs, they didn't just sit down and start writing from their unconscious and continue on that process and say, yeah, I'm going to make some revisions. This sounds good. And suddenly a transformative novel was in front of them. That mentality produces average work. And that's why we have so much average work right now. This is good, but it's not great. To write something like Moby Dick, as we're about to see from Melville, requires you to start not with the story, but with the theme. Because if you are talented enough, you can turn any theme into a beautiful story, because that is the easy part. And so let's hear from Melville himself. And when you disagree, just remember, you are not disagreeing with me, Right Conscious, the booktuber, who's rambunctious. You are disagreeing with Melville, Pynchon, McCarthy, DeLillo, Morrison, Dostoevsky, Tolstoy, Jane Austen, so many of the greatest authors of all time. And who are you siding with? Authors who won't even come close to touching even a modicum of the greatness of some of the authors I just named. And so this is a quote from Moby Dick. And so let's go. Quote, "To produce a mighty book, you must choose a mighty theme. No great and enduring volume can ever be written on the flea, though many there be who have tried it." Did you guys hear that? You must choose. Did you hear that? Choose. It doesn't come from this unconscious connection. It doesn't come just because you thought of it and it's a fun thing and you're interested in the idea. You choose a mighty theme. You choose the white whale. You choose the weaver god. You choose Gnosticism. And maybe that comes a little bit later, but you find it and you make it big. You make it important. Then you hide it. So you're not preaching. That's what people will say. That's what there'll be a low level comment out there that didn't get to this part that says, when writers do this, they're just preaching. That's called being a shitty writer. And so let's look at what people are writing right now. All the genre slop isn't even a flea, it's bacteria. And there's really great genre writing out there, don't get me wrong, mostly in sci-fi and fantasy. And the same could be said about literary fiction, about what MFAs are putting out, what all the quota writers, are putting out. It's good, it's average, but it can never be great because the foundation it's being built on is weak. Not just weak because they're not exploring this grand theme, but they've never actually lived their work. You want to talk about lived experience. You want to talk about a marginalized voice. What about a talented teacher, a talented writer, a thinker, a feeler, becoming a whaler? Can you imagine what he went through? This isn't the West Side Story, everyone. This isn't New York City. We don't got little jabronis like Tony making all the sleepers shed a tear. Melville viewed his writing process, what he was doing, as transformative, because the first step of writing transformative literature is to always be in transformation yourself. Melville said that since the day that he started writing, not 3 weeks had passed since I had unfolded within myself. Listen to that again. Every 3 weeks, Melville was transforming himself through what he was experiencing within his writing. People will say all the time, what do you mean about transformation? How often can you transform? Logic bros don't understand the depths of the soul, the depths that you can go to with art, with contemplation, with nature, with love every single day. Yes, I have to be this stable character in reality that supports my family and goes to work and does X, Y, and Z. But my soul can be in crisis. My soul can always be blooming or dying. And so if we are going to create a literary renaissance, the white whale is not just the standard, it's what we have to stand upon if we want to make an impact in this world. Moby Dick was published 175 years ago. We have to do better. We have shied away from this idea. And it's partially because writers aren't as good anymore. And not as good in the sense that I'm talking about style or anything like that, but just the amount of time and energy put into the work. We've made it okay to toil your life away, doing nothing at a job to support the GDP and not doing anything with the talent that you've been given. We've made it okay for authors to just focus on writing for fun or doing what they want to do. This is a story I always wanted to tell. And writing a bunch of slop, staying within the lines and not producing anything magnificent. We have become complacent. And it's sad that we are one of the only communities, artistic communities out there that continues to have to look back to the past because nobody in the present wants to make it happen. There are plenty of good, if not great books being released every single year in the hundreds, in the thousands, but there are very few extraordinary masterpieces being written. And on November 15th, the Right Conscious Book Club is reading Moby Dick. Yes, everyone, we are making the confrontation with the soul together. The Right Conscious Book Club is the most active book club in the world. We read anywhere from 6 to 10 transformative novels every single month. Some of those are classics and some of those are contemporary novels that are bangers. And so if you want to get access to the book club, to my literature and writing courses, to my writing, and so much more, you need to go check out the Substack. That is linked down in the description below. As you guys can see, I have a ton of content here. Here's a 3-hour video, a 2-hour live stream, just content coming out almost every single day on various parts of reading and writing. I will also be releasing the rest of the 2025 book club schedule within the next day or two. And spoiler alert, Moby Dick is on there on November 15th. And so you guys have 2.5 months to prep, to read. I want to hear your thoughts. I would love to meet you. And so if you would like to join, I would love to have you, and let's get back to the video. So we've already talked about writers not experiencing enough of life and not putting enough time into their writing, but there is also something risky about being a genius, about writing one of these masterpieces. And Melville says of this that, quote, "But truth is ever incoherent. And when the big hearts strike together, the concussion is a little stunning, for a genius is like a volcano. When it has once burst forth, it must burn itself out." And so another thing that this generation of writers is lacking is this genius code, this genius quality. And I think it's partially because of the insanity of inundation that we receive from digital technology, from art, from the shock jocking of culture across all spectrums. Because no matter how you spin it, if you are consuming modern culture, then you are throwing yourself into a dialectic in terms of your interpretation of it, whether you support it or don't support it. And in actuality, true genius comes from within. It comes from viewing reality and art vertically, not horizontally. But the horizontal abyss of simulacra and phantasm that we've created, whether that's you joining it or rejecting it, being like, oh, modern writers suck, kind of like what I'm doing right now, but even worse, and saying that, oh, all these people with green hair and this and that, it's so bad. All that is moving away from the self, focusing too much on what's going on in the now. If Melville was focused on the now in Moby Dick, it would just be a random pulp novel. He's focused on the big questions. He's focused on things that he's not just contemplated in his own soul, but he felt out in nature itself. He's writing about his connection with the dark Gnostic God. That isn't some cookie cutter, I went to church growing up, or I listened to Jordan Peterson and came back to Christianity type approach. And that's why authors like Flannery O'Connor, Faulkner, and Cormac McCarthy, who inverted and messed around with Christianity and its symbolism, all loved Herman Melville and all looked to him because they were unorthodox in their beliefs, in their feelings. And that's kind of one of the problems that we also have, that if you want to exist in this society and be normal and have a wife or a husband and go through life, it's much harder to work with these incoherent views because there's a logic bro on every corner. There's an AI response that can push you out of actually exploring it, because many of the irrational things that I've explored in my life, in the end, were irrational. We're dumb. Everyone that told me I was wrong was right. But if I would have stopped and kept and continue, if I continued or started listening to those people like 99% of the world does, I wouldn't have come to my greatest breakthroughs as a human being, as an artist, as a speaker, whatever. And so that's one of the other problems with the flattening of culture and the flattening of language with AI and other things is we can't have these concussions as much. Because if you look back at that quote again, and when the big hearts strike together, the concussion is a little stunning. So when two ideas, and he's really talking about the self. So when you are leading from the heart, not leading from the mind, and you confront another person, let's say through love or through the intellect, that's a concussion. But when you confront real literature, that's a concussion. That's transformation. It should inspire you to want to do better. That's how I view this. That's why I call it transformative, because it doesn't just rearrange a thought in my mind like, wow, there's a Gnostic God out there. I should think about that. It makes me view that frame of reality in my day-to-day life. During the wee hours, I can be thinking about it. And that circles back to our earlier point about having that foundation, because if you have this big fish, this is what David Lynch calls the big fish. If you catch that big fish and you wait, you release all the smaller ones, and then that big fish confronts your conscious revisionary mind and then your unconscious mind in the artistic process, that's where the real magic happens. And it's funny that I mentioned Lynch, because what Lynch does, shout out David Lynch. I have, I think, about 10 videos on him on this channel if you want to go look at those. A really good one on his process of writing screenplays, which is the only kind of deep dive into that anywhere online. Lynch had confronted the darkness in the world and his own soul and was comfortable with it. Cormac McCarthy, Thomas Pynchon, Melville, all these people. And Melville says of this, in certain moods, no man can weigh this world without throwing in something, somehow like original sin, to strike the uneven balance. And so Melville is saying here that the contemplation of darkness activates the artist. And I believe that all this horror stuff, I say horror stuff, but the obsession with horror films and literature with all this fake pseudo darkness, whether it's metal music or shadow rap, which I love both of those genres. I even love some horror literature. But the people who become obsessed with that are dealing with a simulacra of darkness. It's pseudo shadow work. That actual confrontation happens not only in the soul, but in nature. It's no surprise that David Lynch was raised in Idaho, back when Boise wasn't this metropolis for Mormons and college students and people fleeing California that it is today. He was there when it was just a town in Idaho. And then his life dramatically changed when he had this simple upbringing and he had to confront the harsh reality of Philadelphia in the 1960s and 1970s as an art student. The same could be said about Cormac McCarthy and so many other people. They had this natural upbringing and were immersed in nature. And while in that, obviously he had to confront the darker side of reality, which nature is a really good teacher of. And then later on, combine that with civilization and the dark elements of civilization. And that has always been a beautiful recipe for success when it comes to literature. But once again, we're talking about soul level stuff. We're not talking about surface level Stephen King's interpretations, of darkness or mental illness or stuff like that. I guess we are now these little true crime obsessed, flattened individuals that don't understand that anymore. And that's one of the other reasons we can't catapult our work, because it's not just about adding darkness to your novel. It's not just like being like, yep. Because when you read McCarthy, outside of his like really violent novels, like the Border Trilogy or The Passenger, The Orchard Keeper, there isn't too much violence, but the darkness is there. When you read Moby Dick, it isn't a slasher. The darkness is there. And that's something intuitive. That's what we call genius. And what's even crazier is that we've now replaced that with trauma. We think that trauma, this I just randomly put this here, this Ronkian idea that art is created from artists on these immortality projects who were traumatized. Ernest Becker in his book, The Denial of Death, took this idea further. We've been plugged with this idea, but how good has the trauma literature scene been? actually not very good. There's really good authors, Sylvia Plath and Sexton, James Wright when he gets into it, John Berryman, yada, yada, yada. But trying to move trauma into art, in my opinion, is another pseudo way of not having to confront the actual trauma of being here in this universe, having to live on the prison planet. The Gnostic idea that O'Connor, once again, Faulkner, McCarthy, Melville, this whole lineage was exploring. That's why they were successful. They picked a really good foundation to build upon. And you don't have to pick that one exactly. But most of the big hotspots when it comes to jumping off from are rooted in darkness. And I've talked about before that one of our missions here in the Literary Renaissance is to find the hotspots that are built on the concept of light and happiness, which there are fewer of, and, grow those. But nonetheless, most writers out there don't even know. If you ask them about these hotspots, if you ask them about their lineage, they'll go on and on about some random people, but they don't know where they're writing from or where they're going. They're just writing. And that's what I've realized. People are just writing. And if you're writing poetry, cool. If you're writing for fun, it doesn't matter. But if you are going to ask someone to read your novel, if you're going to ask someone to spend 5 hours plus in your mind with your story, wouldn't you want a big foundation to leap on? That's a huge risk. And because authors haven't been doing this, we've lost trust. We don't want to read new books because we know that no one's standing on anything. And what's funny is that many of the great postmodernist writers had huge foundations. David Foster Wallace had Don DeLillo and Thomas Pynchon to stand with. And they all had people rooted in modernism. William Gass, I could go on and on about the greatest postmodernist writers, but all these modern postmodernists or these random experimental writers in the present, a lot of them don't have that rooting. And when they do, they are the ones who I feel like are successful. And so this is the direction this community needs to take if we actually want to be taken seriously again, if we want to create literary celebrities. Because what's wild is that J.K. Rowling has kind of moved her way up to being a celebrity. That's just because of the volume of her sales and how big Harry Potter was. But when you look at other best-selling authors, Colleen Hoover, Sarah J. Maas, these are more book talk authors, James Patterson, their fans aren't real fans because their works are superficial and shallow. People actually are just there to turn the page and get some dopamine. But when someone transforms you, you're indebted to them. You want to get to know more about them. You want to support them. You want to meet them and shake their hand. This happened to me yesterday, I think, at a coffee shop here in Tucson. I met this local author who I've been reading for 12 or 13 years, finally. And I was like starstruck kind of. I was like, oh shit, what's up? I was like stumbling over my words because I was so excited because he really helped me on my writing journey. And so this idea of creating these literary celebrities who are going to catapult us and literary fiction and transformative fiction to the top requires actual authors putting out transformative work. And so if it doesn't happen now, all of us will be the foundation for those authors in the next generation to spring off of. We have to stake a claim. We have to say, this is not what literature is. It's not just about the story. We have millions of stories, or we have enough stories than we know what to do with. But we need people now who can be shamans, who can be priests, who can be leaders, for people to follow, for people to attach to, for people to be lifted, for people to be lifted up by. And I know we're not supposed to admit that. I know we're supposed to say we're all independent, critical thinkers. We all watch CoffeeZilla. We would never fall into that. We will never give any worship or money or support to anybody because that could create a cult of personality. But if you don't want to take that direction, then the only direction that you have that is a solution is trusting traditional publishing, which is already dead. And so this is the way out. Herman Melville is a template for us to follow. His advice on writing is something that we need to follow if we want to create a literary renaissance. I believe in each and every one of you. I know that you can do it. It's not going to happen this month or this year, but over the next 3 to 5 years, you can write something transformative, but while simultaneously becoming the type of person who can share that transformative work to the world and speak about it or write about it coherently and make people interested in it. This is a 3 to 5 year project that we are embarking on. If you are down for it, say I'm down for it down below. Say, I am in the literary renaissance. I can do this. And so, once again, if you guys want to support me for free, subscribe to the channel, leave a like, go check out my second channel, The Literary Renaissance, where I show you actual tactics on how to share your work out with the world. Once again, if you guys are interested in my book club, we are reading Moby Dick in November. We also read multiple transformative novels every single month. You can also check out my reading, writing, reading and writing courses over there, and so much more, live streams. Or if you really want to support me in the movement, then write a transformative piece of work and get it out there, because that won't just elevate you, it elevates everybody else. And so thank you guys for being here, and I will see you very, very soon in the next video.